The days turned into weeks, and Emily settled into a routine that felt more like a performance than a life. Every morning she woke up to the soft hum of the city outside her window, the distant sounds of cars honking and people rushing to work. She would sit on the edge of her bed for a few minutes, staring at the sunlight streaming through the blinds, trying to gather the energy to face another day in Andrew's penthouse. Breakfast was always quiet. Andrew left early for work most mornings, leaving behind a note or a text message reminding her to make herself comfortable. Sometimes he ordered food to be delivered before he left, but more often than not, Emily ended up making toast or cereal for herself. The kitchen felt too big, too empty without someone to share it with. She would eat quickly, cleaning up after herself before retreating to her room or wandering around the apartment aimlessly. At first, Emily tried to stay, busy by exploring the penthouse. There were shelves filled with books, sleek leather couches, and artwork that seemed expensive but impersonal. None of it made her feel at home. Instead, she found herself drawn to the balcony, where she could stand and watch the world below. From this height, everything looked small and distant, like she was watching a movie instead of living in it. It helped her forget, just for a little while, that her life had become something she barely recognized. But staying cooped up in the apartment wasn't sustainable. One afternoon, Emily decided to go out. She needed fresh air, a change of scenery, anything to break the monotony. She wandered through the streets near the building, taking in the sights and sounds of the city. Eventually, she stumbled upon a small community center with a sign outside advertising volunteer opportunities. On impulse, she walked inside. The woman at the front desk greeted her warmly. Her name was Maria, and she ran a shelter for families in need. When Emily mentioned she was looking for something to do, Maria handed her an application form with a smile. "We're always looking for volunteers," she said. "Even just a few hours a week can make a big difference." Emily filled out the form right there, feeling a spark of hope for the first time in weeks. Maybe this was what she needed, a way to focus on something other than her own problems. A way to feel useful again. Over the next few weeks, volunteering became Emily's escape. She spent 2 afternoons a week at the shelter, helping organize donations, serving meals, and talking to the people who came in. They shared their stories with her, stories of hardship, resilience, and hope. And Emily listened intently, finding comfort in their honesty. For the first time since the wedding, she felt like she belonged somewhere. Back at the penthouse, however, things remained strained. Andrew was polite but distant, treating Emily more like a guest than a wife. He rarely asked about her day or showed interest in what she did outside the apartment. Most evenings he worked late, returning home only to eat dinner alone in his study. Occasionally they sat together in the living room, exchanging polite conversation about neutral topics like the weather or current events. But the silence between them spoke louder than any words ever could. One evening, as Emily was tidying up the living room, she noticed a box tucked away in a corner of the hallway closet. Curious, she opened it and found stacks of papers, letters, and photographs. At first glance, it seemed like old files Andrew had forgotten about, but as she sifted through them, she realized they were personal belongings, things that must have belonged to Lily. Her heart raced as she picked up a letter written in Lily's handwriting. The date on the envelope was from months before the accident. Carefully, Emily unfolded the paper and began reading. Lily's words were filled with frustration and doubt, describing arguments with Andrew and feelings of being controlled. "He acts like he cares," Lily had written, "but sometimes I wonder if he even knows me at all." Emily froze, the letter trembling in her hands. This wasn't the man Andrew pretended to be, the loving fiancé who honored Lily's memory. This was someone else entirely, someone who might have been manipulating Lily all along. For hours, Emily sat on the floor of the closet, reading through the letters and documents. Each one painted a clearer picture of a relationship built on power rather than love. By the time she finished, tears streamed down her face. She felt angry, not just at Andrew, but at herself for letting her family push her into this situation without knowing the truth. The next morning, Emily confronted Andrew. She waited until he returned from work, sitting nervously on the couch with the letter spread out on the coffee table in front of her. When he walked in, his expression shifted from surprise to concern when he saw the papers. "What is this?" he asked, setting his briefcase down. "This is your relationship with my sister," Emily replied, her voice shaking. "Or should I say what you really thought of her?" Andrew sighed, running a hand through his hair. He didn't deny it. Instead, he sank onto the couch beside her, looking tired. "I know how it looks," he admitted. "But you don't understand the whole story." "Then explain it to me," Emily demanded, her voice rising. "Because from what I've read, it seems like you treated Lily like a possession, like she was supposed to do whatever you wanted." Andrew hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Lily and I had our differences, yes, we argued, we disagreed, but I cared about her. I still care about her. And yes, maybe I handled some things wrong. But none of that changes the fact that I loved her." Emily shook her head, unable to believe him. "If you loved her, why were you so quick to marry me? Why didn't you wait for her to wake up?" "I didn't have a choice," Andrew snapped, his patience wearing thin. "Your parents gave me an ultimatum. Either I married you or they cut ties completely. Do you think I wanted this? To be stuck in a loveless marriage because of guilt and obligation?" His words hit Emily like a punch to the gut. She hadn't realized her parents had pressured him, too. All this time she thought he had agreed willingly, but now she saw how tangled everything was, how everyone involved had played a part in creating this mess. The argument ended abruptly, with both of them retreating to separate corners of the apartment. Emily locked herself in her room, replaying the conversation over and over in her mind. She felt trapped, caught in a web of lies and manipulations that went deeper than she had imagined. That night, sleep eluded her. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if there was any way out of this nightmare. Could she leave Andrew? Would her family disown her if she did? And what about Lily? What would happen when, or if, she woke up? The questions swirled in her mind, keeping her awake until dawn. When morning finally came, Emily made a decision. She couldn't keep living like this, pretending everything was okay when it clearly wasn't. Something had to change, and she was going to be the one to make it happen. Over the next few days, Emily began taking small steps toward reclaiming her independence. She started spending more time at the shelter, throwing herself into the work and finding solace in the connections she made there. She also reached out to an old friend from college, someone she trusted enough to confide in. Talking to someone outside the situation helped her gain perspective and reminded her that she wasn't alone. Meanwhile, tensions between Emily and Andrew continued to simmer. They avoided each other as much as possible, communicating only when necessary. The penthouse, once a symbol of luxury, now felt suffocating. Every room echoed with unspoken words and unresolved conflicts. Despite the growing distance between them, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that Andrew wasn't entirely to blame for their circumstances. His admission about her parents' ultimatum lingered in her mind, forcing her to confront uncomfortable truths about her family. Were they really acting out of love, or was it greed that drove them to push her into this marriage? Did they even care about her happiness, or was she just a pawn in their game? These questions plagued Emily, deepening her resolve to take control of her life. She didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. She couldn't stay in this toxic arrangement forever. Somehow she would find a way to break free and hopefully in the process rediscover who she truly was. Emily Dawson sat quietly on the edge of her bed, staring at the small crack in the ceiling above her. It was one of those moments where she wished she could disappear into the wall, just fade away like a shadow. Her mind was heavy with thoughts she couldn't escape. Thoughts about her family, her sister Lily, and the impossible situation they had pushed her into. Life wasn't fair, but this felt cruel. Lily was everything Emily wasn't. Or at least that's what their parents always said. Lily was confident, beautiful, and charming. She walked into a room and people noticed her. Emily, on the other hand, preferred to stay in the background, She liked books more than parties, quiet evenings over loud gatherings. But none of that mattered to her parents. To them, Emily was invisible unless they needed something from her, and now they needed something big, something Emily never imagined she'd have to face. It all started 3 months ago when Lily got into a terrible car accident. The doctors called it a miracle that she survived, but miracles came with consequences. Lily slipped into a coma, and no one knew if or when she would wake up. For weeks, the family lived in limbo, visiting her bedside every day, hoping for a sign of improvement. But as the days turned into weeks, reality began to sink in. Lily might not wake up anytime soon, and her absence left a gaping hole in everyone's lives. But it wasn't just emotional pain that weighed on the family, it was money. Andrew Carter, Lily's fiancé, was rich, filthy rich. He owned tech companies that made millions, and he had promised Lily a life of luxury. Their engagement had been the talk of the town, a perfect match between two successful people destined for greatness. But now, with Lily in a coma, things were different. Very different. Emily's parents saw an opportunity, or rather, they saw a solution to their problems. They didn't come right out and say it, but Emily understood what they were thinking. If Lily couldn't marry Andrew, then maybe someone else could step in. Someone who looked enough like Lily to keep him interested. Someone who wouldn't question orders or fight back. That someone was Emily. The first time her mother brought it up, Emily thought she was joking. "You can't be serious," Emily said, shaking her head. "I'm not Lily. I can't just take her place." Her mother sighed, sitting down beside her. "We're not asking you to be Lily. We're asking you to do what's best for this family. Andrew cares about us because of Lily, but if we lose that connection..." She trailed off, letting the words hang in the air. Emily's father joined in later that evening, his tone firm and unyielding. "Do you think we want this? Of course not. But we've invested so much in this relationship. Your sister chose Andrew for a reason. And now it's your duty to make sure nothing falls apart." Duty. That word stuck with Emily. It echoed in her mind long after the conversation ended. Was this really her duty? To replace her own sister? To marry a man she barely knew, all because her family told her to? It felt wrong on so many levels, but the pressure was relentless. Her parents painted a picture of disaster if she refused. Financial ruin, shame, isolation. They made her feel like saying no wasn't even an option. Andrew himself seemed conflicted when they approached him with the idea. At first, he dismissed it outright. "This is insane," he said during their awkward meeting at his penthouse. "I loved Lily. I still love her. Marrying her sister, that's not going to fix anything." But Emily's parents were persuasive. They reminded him of how close he was to their family, how much support they had given him over the years. They framed the marriage as a temporary arrangement, a way to honor Lily's memory until she woke up. Eventually, Andrew caved. Not because he wanted to, but because he didn't know how to say no without causing more drama. So here, Emily was, standing in front of a mirror on the morning of her wedding day, trying to convince herself that this was real, that this was happening. She wore a simple white dress, borrowed from a cousin, and her hair was pulled back into a loose bun. There was no veil, no elaborate decorations, no guests cheering her on. Just a quick ceremony at City Hall, witnessed by her parents and a few distant relatives. As she repeated the vows, Emily felt numb. The words rolled off her tongue, but they didn't mean anything. How could they? She wasn't marrying for love or happiness. She was marrying to fulfill an obligation, to keep her family afloat. Andrew stood beside her, his expression unreadable. He held her hand briefly during the ceremony, but his touch was cold, distant. Even the ring he slipped onto her finger felt foreign, like it belonged to someone else. Afterward, there was no celebration, no champagne or cake cutting. Emily climbed into Andrew's sleek black car, clutching her bouquet tightly as they drove to his penthouse downtown. The ride was silent except for the soft hum of the engine. Neither of them spoke, each lost in their own thoughts. When they arrived, Emily stepped inside the luxurious apartment for the first time. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered breathtaking views of the city skyline, and modern furniture filled the space with sleek elegance. It was beautiful, yes, but it felt empty, cold, like a museum instead of a home. "Make yourself comfortable," Andrew said, setting down his keys on the kitchen counter. His voice was polite but detached, as if he were speaking to a business associate rather than his new wife. "I'll show you to your room." "Your room, not our room." Emily followed him down a hallway lined with abstract paintings, her heels clicking softly against the hardwood floor. He opened a door to reveal a spacious bedroom decorated in neutral tones. A king-sized bed sat in the center, flanked by matching nightstands. Everything looked pristine, untouched. "This will be yours," Andrew explained. "Mine is down the hall. We don't have to share anything unless you want to." His words hung awkwardly in the air, and Emily nodded quickly, avoiding eye contact. "Thank you," she murmured, stepping inside. Once the door closed behind her, she sank onto the edge of the bed, tears welling up in her eyes. What had she done? How had her life spiraled so far out of control? For hours, Emily stayed in her room, unpacking the few belongings she had brought with her. Each item reminded her of the life she left behind: the cozy little apartment she once shared with a roommate, the bookstore where she worked part-time, the park where she used to go for long walks. All of it felt like another world now, unreachable. By the time evening fell, hunger finally forced her to leave the sanctuary of her room. She found Andrew in the living room, scrolling through emails on his laptop. He glanced up when she entered, closing the lid gently. "Hungry?" he asked, gesturing toward the kitchen. "I ordered dinner. Chinese food okay?" Emily nodded, grateful for the distraction. As they ate together at the dining table, they made small talk about trivial things, the weather, traffic, random news headlines, anything to avoid talking about the elephant in the room. By the end of the meal, Emily realized that this was likely how their days would unfold. Polite conversations, careful avoidance of deeper topics, and a growing sense of loneliness. That night, lying awake in her unfamiliar bed, Emily stared at the ceiling again. This time, though, the cracks weren't hers to fix. Instead, she wondered if she'd ever find a way to piece together the broken fragments of her own life. Emily's life felt like it was balancing on the edge of a knife. Every day brought new challenges, new questions she wasn't sure she could answer. But one thing became clearer with each passing week. Staying in Andrew's penthouse was no longer an option. The walls that once seemed luxurious now felt like they were closing in on her, suffocating her with memories of decisions made for all the wrong reasons. One crisp morning, as Emily sipped her coffee on the balcony, her phone buzzed with a notification. It was a text from Maria at the shelter, asking if she could come in earlier than usual to help sort donations. Emily hesitated for only a moment before replying with a quick yes. Anything to get out of the apartment, to feel useful again. When she arrived at the shelter, the familiar hum of activity greeted her. Boxes of clothes and canned goods lined the hallway, and volunteers bustled around, sorting items into piles. Emily rolled up her sleeves and got to work, losing herself in the rhythm of folding shirts and organizing cans. For a few hours, she forgot about the weight pressing down on her shoulders. It wasn't until lunchtime that reality came rushing back. As she sat in the break room eating a sandwich, Maria approached her with a concerned look. "You've been here almost every day this week," Maria said gently. "Is everything okay?" Emily forced a smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm fine," she replied. "Just needed something to do." Maria studied her for a moment before sitting down across from her. "You don't have to tell me anything you're not ready to share, but I want you to know I'm here if you need someone to talk to." For the first time in weeks, Emily felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. She blinked them away quickly, nodding in gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. "That means a lot." After lunch, Emily returned to sorting donations. But her mind kept drifting back to Maria's words. Maybe it was time to open up, to let someone see the mess her life had become. She couldn't keep carrying this burden alone. Later that evening, Emily returned to the penthouse exhausted but feeling slightly lighter. Andrew was already home, sitting in the living room with a glass of wine in hand. He glanced up when she entered, his expression unreadable. "Long day?" he asked casually. Emily nodded, setting her bag down by the door. "Yeah, it was busy at the shelter." Andrew raised an eyebrow. "You're volunteering a lot these days." "It keeps me occupied," Emily replied, shrugging. "Better than sitting around here doing nothing." There was a pause, and for a moment Emily thought he might say something more. But instead he simply nodded and turned his attention back to the book in his lap. The silence between them stretched, on heavy and uncomfortable. As Emily headed to her room, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. The tension in the air was palpable, like the calm before a storm. She didn't know what would happen next, but she knew she couldn't keep avoiding the truth. The next morning, Emily woke up early, unable to sleep. Her mind was racing with thoughts of Lily, Andrew, and the tangled web of lies that had brought her to this point. She decided to visit the hospital where Lily was still in a coma. It had been weeks since she'd last gone, and guilt gnawed at her for staying away so long. When she arrived, the sterile smell of antiseptic hit her immediately. She made her way to Lily's room, her heart pounding with each step. Pushing open the door, she froze. A nurse was adjusting the machines beside Lily's bed, checking vitals and jotting notes on a clipboard. "How is she?" Emily asked softly, stepping closer. The nurse smiled kindly. "Her condition is stable, but there haven't been any significant changes." Emily nodded, pulling up a chair beside the bed. She took Lily's hand in hers, feeling the coolness of her skin. "Hey, Lil," she murmured. "It's me. I miss you." Tears welled up in her eyes as she spoke, her voice trembling. "I don't know what to do anymore. Everything feels so messed up. I wish you were here to tell me what to do." For a long time, Emily sat there talking to Lily as if she could hear her. She poured out her heart, confessing everything, from the marriage to Andrew to the letters she'd found. By the time she finished, her throat was raw, and her cheeks were streaked with tears. As she stood to leave, a doctor entered the room. He introduced himself and explained that while Lily's recovery remained uncertain, there were signs of brain activity that offered hope. "It's a waiting game now," he said. "But miracles do happen." Emily left the hospital with a mix of emotions swirling inside her. On one hand, the news gave her a glimmer of hope. On the other, it filled her with dread. What would happen if Lily woke up? Would she understand why Emily had married Andrew? Or would she hate her forever? Over the next few days, Emily threw herself even deeper into her volunteer work at the Yao shelter. She spent long hours helping others, finding comfort in the simplicity of their struggles. One afternoon, as she sorted through a box of donated books, she noticed a familiar face across the room. Ryan Bennett. She'd seen him around the shelter before, always quietly pitching in wherever he was needed. He was an architect who volunteered regularly, using his skills to design renovations for the building. Emily had admired his dedication from afar, but never worked up the courage to speak to him. Today, however, Ryan approached her with a warm smile. "Hey, I think we've crossed paths a few times," he said. "I'm Ryan." Emily hesitated for a moment before shaking his hand. "Emily?" she replied. They struck up a conversation talking about the shelter and their shared passion for helping others. Ryan's easygoing nature put Emily at ease, and for the first time in months, she found herself laughing genuinely. They exchanged numbers, agreeing to meet up again soon. Back at the penthouse, Emily's interactions with Andrew grew increasingly strained. One evening, after another tense dinner, she finally snapped. "Why are we even pretending anymore?" she demanded, slamming her fork onto the table. "This isn't working. None of it is." Andrew looked startled but didn't respond right away. Finally, he sighed. "What do you want me to say, Emily?" that I regret marrying you, that I wish things were different, because I do, but we can't undo what's been done. I know that, Emily shot back, but maybe we can stop pretending this is okay. Maybe we can admit that neither of us wanted this. Andrew stared at her for a long moment before nodding slowly. Fine, let's stop pretending. The agreement hung in the air between them, heavy and final. For the first time, Emily felt a flicker of relief. Admitting the truth, even if it hurt, was better than living a lie. A few days later, Emily received a call from the hospital. Lily had shown signs of waking up. Her heart raced as she rushed to the hospital, fear and hope battling within her. When she entered Lily's room, she saw her sister's eyes fluttering open, weak but aware. Lily, Emily whispered, gripping her hand tightly. Lily's gaze met hers, confused but present. Em? She croaked, her voice barely audible. Tears streamed down Emily's face as she nodded. It's me. You're going to be okay. For a moment, they simply held on to each other, the weight of everything unsaid hanging in the air. Emily knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in months, she felt a spark of hope. Things might never go back to the way they were, but maybe, just maybe, they could find a way forward together. The days following Lily's awakening were a whirlwind of emotions. Emily spent every spare moment at the hospital, sitting by her sister's bedside and helping her adjust to the world she had been absent from for so long. At first, Lily was disoriented, struggling to piece together fragments of her memory. Her voice was weak, her movements slow, but with each passing day, she grew stronger. Emily wanted nothing more than to tell Lily everything: the marriage to Andrew, the letters, the guilt she carried, but she couldn't bring herself to do it. Instead, she focused on small talk, sharing stories about their childhood and reminiscing about happier times. It felt like walking on eggshells, tiptoeing around the truth while hoping Lily wouldn't notice the cracks beneath her feet. One afternoon, as Emily flipped through an old photo album they had brought from home, Lily suddenly asked, "What happened to Andrew? Why hasn't he come to see me?" Emily froze, her fingers hovering over a picture of Lily and Andrew at a charity gala. She forced a smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. "He's been busy with work," she said vaguely. "But I'm sure he'll visit soon." Lily frowned, studying her sister's face. "You're not telling me something," she said quietly. "I can tell." Emily hesitated, torn between honesty and fear. Finally, she sighed. "There's a lot we need to talk about, Lil, but not right now. You're still recovering, and I don't want to overwhelm you." Lily didn't press further, but Emily could see the suspicion in her eyes. The silence between them stretched, unheavy and uncomfortable. Meanwhile, back at the penthouse, Andrew seemed distant, almost relieved that Emily was spending less time there. They barely spoke anymore, communicating only when necessary. Emily knew their marriage was hanging by a thread, but neither of them made a move to sever it completely. Part of her wondered if Andrew was waiting for Lily to wake up too, perhaps hoping that her return would somehow untangle the mess they were all caught in. At the shelter, Emily found solace in her work. Sorting donations, serving meals, and organizing events gave her a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in months. Ryan often joined her, his presence calming and reassuring. Over time, their conversations grew deeper, moving beyond casual chatter to more personal topics. One evening, as they sat together in the break room sipping coffee, Ryan turned to her with a gentle smile. "You've been carrying a lot on your shoulders lately," he said. "Do you ever feel like you can let go of some of it?" Emily looked down at her cup, tracing the rim with her finger. "I wish it were that simple," she admitted. "But my life is complicated, messy. I don't even know where to start." Ryan nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes starting is the hardest part, but you don't have to figure everything out at once. Just take it one step at a time." His words stayed with her long after they parted ways that night. For the first time in weeks, Emily allowed herself to imagine a future where she wasn't weighed down by guilt and obligation. A future where she could be free. Back at the hospital, Emily continued visiting Lily daily, watching as her sister regained strength and clarity. One day, Lily broached the subject of Andrew again. "Why won't anyone tell me what's going on?" she demanded, frustration evident in her tone. "Something's off, Em. I can feel it." Emily took a deep breath, knowing she couldn't avoid the conversation any longer. "Okay," she said slowly. "But before I say anything, you need to promise me you'll hear me out. No interruptions." Lily nodded, her expression serious. Emily began haltingly, explaining how their parents had pressured her into marrying Andrew after the accident. She described the ultimatum they had given him, the letters she had found, and the strained relationship they had tried and failed to build. By the time she finished, tears streamed down her face, and she braced herself for Lily's reaction. For a long moment, Lily said nothing. Then, to Emily's surprise, she reached out and took her hand. "I'm angry," she admitted. "Not just at you, but at everyone involved. Mom and Dad, Andrew, even myself for not seeing the truth sooner." Emily blinked in shock. "You're not mad at me?" "Of course I am," Lily replied honestly. "But I understand why you did it. You thought you were doing the right thing. For me, for the family. That doesn't make it okay, but it does mean I can forgive you." Eventually, relief washed over Emily, followed by a wave of gratitude. She hugged her sister tightly, vowing to make things right between them. As the weeks passed, Emily began taking steps toward reclaiming her independence. She started looking for apartments, determined to move out of Andrew's penthouse. When she told him, he didn't argue or try to stop her. Instead, he offered to help cover the costs, saying it was the least he could do. Emily accepted reluctantly, knowing she needed financial stability while she figured things out. At the same time, Lily began attending therapy sessions to process her trauma and rebuild her confidence. Through counseling, she confronted her own doubts about her relationship with Andrew, realizing how much control he had exerted over her life. Though it was painful, she emerged stronger and more self-assured. One evening, as Emily packed boxes in her new apartment, a cozy one-bedroom, near the shelter, there was a knock at the door. Opening it, she found Ryan standing there with a bottle of wine and a warm smile. "Housewarming gift," he said, holding it up. "Mind if I come in?" Emily laughed, stepping aside to let him enter. "Perfect timing. I could use a distraction." They spent the evening unpacking and talking, their connection growing stronger with each passing hour. For the first time in months, Emily felt a spark of happiness, a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, she deserved love on her own terms. A few days later, Emily met Lily for lunch at a cafe downtown. It was their first outing since Lily's release from the hospital, and both sisters were eager to reconnect. Over sandwiches and coffee, they talked openly about their plans for the future. "I've decided to pursue social work," Lily announced, her eyes bright with excitement. "I want to help people who are going through what I did. Maybe it'll give me a sense of purpose again." Emily smiled proudly. "That sounds amazing, Lil. I know you'll be incredible at it." "What about you?" Lily asked. "Are you happy with this new place? With Ryan?" Emily blushed slightly at the mention of Ryan's name. "I think I'm getting there," she admitted. "It's scary, starting over, but I feel like I'm finally finding myself again." Lily reached across the table, squeezing her hand. "Good. You deserve it, Em. After everything you've been through, you deserve happiness." As they left the cafe, arm in arm, Emily felt a weight lift off her shoulders. The road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but for the first time in a long time, she believed she could face it, with her sister by her side and the promise of a brighter future ahead. Emily's new apartment was small but cozy, with sunlight streaming through the windows and a view of the park across the street. It wasn't luxurious like Andrew's penthouse, but it felt real, like hers. She spent her days volunteering at the shelter, sorting donations, serving meals, and talking to people who reminded her that life was messy and beautiful all at once. The work grounded her, giving her purpose and filling the empty spaces in her heart. Ryan became a regular part of her life, stopping by after work or joining her for coffee on weekends. They weren't rushing into anything. Instead, they took their time learning about each other's quirks and dreams. Emily found herself opening up to him in ways she never thought possible. He listened without judgment, offering comfort when the weight of her past threatened to pull her under. For the first time, she felt seen, not as someone's sister, daughter, or wife, but as herself. One evening, as they sat together on the balcony of her apartment watching the sunset, Ryan turned to her with a soft smile. "You've been through so much," he said, "and yet you keep moving forward. I admire that." Emily looked down at her hands, feeling a blush creep onto her cheeks. "I don't always feel strong," she admitted. "Sometimes I just survive." "That's still something to be proud of," Ryan replied. "Surviving is its own kind of strength." His words stayed with her long after he left that night. For years, Emily had believed she wasn't enough, that she was only useful if she sacrificed herself for others. But now, surrounded by people who cared about her, she began to see herself differently. Maybe she didn't have to carry the world on her shoulders anymore. Maybe it was okay to ask for help. Meanwhile, Lily threw herself into her new career, enrolling in classes to become a social worker. Her determination inspired everyone around her, including Emily. On weekends, they often met for lunch or went for walks in the park, catching up on each other's lives. Their relationship wasn't perfect. They still had moments of tension and unresolved pain, but they were working on it bit by bit. One afternoon, as they strolled along the riverbank, Lily brought up Andrew. "Have you talked to him lately?" she asked casually. Emily shook her head. "Not really. We're officially filing for divorce next week. He's been supportive, though, quietly, in his own way." Lily nodded thoughtfully. "Do you think you'll ever forgive him?" "I already have," Emily replied. "Not because he deserves it, but because holding on to anger feels heavier than letting go. Besides, I think he's trying to change too." Lily smiled faintly. "That's good. I'm glad you're finding peace." They walked in silence for a while, the sound of birds chirping filling the air. Finally, Lily spoke again. "You know, I used to think my life was over when I woke up from the coma. Like everything I cared about was gone. But now—" She paused, looking out at the water. "Now I realize it was a chance to start over, to build something better." Emily squeezed her hand. "Me too," she said softly. "We're lucky, Lil. Not everyone gets a second chance." The day Emily filed for divorce was bittersweet. She stood outside the courthouse with Andrew, both of them signing papers that marked the end of their short-lived marriage. There were no tears, no angry words, just a quiet acknowledgement that they had been caught in a situation neither of them truly wanted. "I'm sorry," Andrew said as they parted ways. "For everything." Emily nodded. "So am I. But maybe this is where we needed to be, to figure things out for ourselves." Andrew gave her a small smile before walking away, leaving Emily standing alone on the courthouse steps. She took a deep breath, feeling lighter than she had in months. This chapter of her life was closing, but another was waiting to begin. A few weeks later, Emily received an unexpected visit from her parents. They knocked on her apartment door hesitantly, looking uncomfortable but determined. "Can we talk?" her mother asked, wringing her hands nervously. Emily stepped aside, letting them in. They sat awkwardly on the couch while she made tea, unsure of how to start the conversation. Finally, her father cleared his throat. "We owe you an apology," he said gruffly. "What we did, to push you into marrying Andrew, it was wrong. We thought we were protecting the family, but instead we hurt you. And Lily." Her mother nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "We never meant to make you feel trapped, sweetheart. We love you. We just lost sight of what mattered most." Emily listened silently, her emotions swirling. Part of her wanted to lash out, to tell them how much their actions had cost her. But another part, the stronger part, knew that holding on to resentment wouldn't fix anything. "Thank you for saying that," she said finally. "It means a lot. But it's going to take time for me to trust you again." Her parents nodded, understanding. They didn't stay long, but their visit marked a turning point. For the first time in years, Emily felt like her family might actually have a future, if they worked for it. As summer approached, Emily's life settled into a rhythm she hadn't known she craved. She continued volunteering at the shelter, spending evenings with Ryan, and rebuilding her bond with Lily. One warm evening, as they sat together on the balcony of her apartment, Ryan reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. "Emily," he began, his voice trembling slightly. "I know we haven't known each other for very long, but every moment with you feels right. You've taught me what it means to be brave, to face challenges head-on and come out stronger. Will you marry me? Not because you have to, but because you want to?" Tears filled Emily's eyes as she stared at the simple ring nestled in the box. She thought about all the pain and heartache she'd endured, all the sacrifices she'd made, and then she thought about Ryan, kind, patient, loving Ryan, and how he made her believe in happy endings again. "Yes," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Yes, I will." Ryan slipped the ring onto her finger, pulling her into a tight embrace. For the first time in her life, Emily felt truly happy, not because of what she had achieved, but because of who she had become. She wasn't the same girl who had stood silently while her family dictated her choices. She was stronger now, wiser, and ready to embrace whatever came next. The wedding was small and intimate, held in the park where Emily and Ryan had shared so many conversations. Lily stood beside her as maid of honor, her smile brighter than ever. Ryan's friends and family joined them, along with Maria and a few volunteers from the shelter who had become like family to Emily. As they exchanged vows under the golden glow of the setting sun, Emily felt a sense of peace wash over her. This wasn't a marriage built on obligation or fear. It was a partnership rooted in love, trust, and mutual respect. It wasn't perfect, and it wouldn't always be easy, but it was hers. And that made all the difference. After the ceremony, they danced beneath twinkling fairy lights. Emily glanced around at the people who had supported her through her darkest days. Her sister, her friends, her new husband. They were proof that even after unimaginable pain, life could still surprise you with joy. Standing there, wrapped in Ryan's arms, Emily realized something important. She wasn't defined by the mistakes of her past. She was shaped by the lessons she had learned, the battles she had fought, and the love she had chosen to give and receive. For the first time in her life, she felt whole. And as the music played and laughter filled the air, Emily knew one thing for certain. She was exactly where she was meant to be.